Welcome back, everybody. It's Friday again, and it's one of our speaker series, right? And I said that sometimes we'll have outside people come in and talk about different opportunities. Other times it could be career development pieces with me. And today what we're going to talk about is how to not screw up your own opportunities that you have, and how not to screw up other people's opportunities. And this can be wrapped around the idea of sexual harassment and how it's just not acceptable. And I know like some of you out there like, oh man, Mr. Finn, like, that's just a bunch of PC nonsense. I think what I'm going to show you is that it's not. And this is real stuff that is really important to all of us. What really made me realize this was in 2018, there's this nationwide survey. And what it showed was that sexual harassment is pretty rampant, right? And so they surveyed young women in high schools and colleges across the nation. They said, you know, have you ever personally experienced sexual harassment? And I wasn't sure what that number might come back at when I was reading through this. 50%. 50%, half of all young women out there, and from places like this school and from colleges, experience some kind of sexual harassment while on their internships or their co-ops. And I'm like, I gotta do something about this. Like, how do I help people like report this, and how do I help people minimize this? And I know, like, for some of you young men out there, you're like, well, this is about women, this is not about me. 1 in 6 young men experience sexual harassment themselves. So think about how many of you will go out there. If you look around, you say, well, probably everyone from my class will probably do some sort of co-op. Good chance that 1 or 2 of you, young men, will experience some sort of sexual harassment. And then there's others that say, well, that happens in certain industries, right? Like, we're just different, we're more professional. And the surveys that are out there, there's one survey I came across for nursing students in college, 40% of them experience some sort of sexual harassment. So it's not a male or a female thing, or this industry or that industry thing. This is across the spectrum. It happens everywhere to everybody. And it's something that we really need to think about. And it just doesn't happen to people. Let's go back to the opportunity piece about how it can screw things up for you. So when I first started here, I had a young man. He went to work at a dealership. And since he was a little guy, he always wanted to work on this certain brand of cars. I'm not going to name it. I don't want to talk about what specific dealership it was, but he always wanted to do this. And so he did everything that he was asked to in his program. He'd earned all his IRCs, and he was ready. He went out on co-op, his dream job. Right out the gates, he was going to be in the place that he always wanted to be. And so he's working, because he's new, right? He's working in the bay closest to the service counter. And he sees this young, attractive woman pull up in her car. You know, he's just about done. He's thinking, oh, you know, maybe I'll get her car if it's the right kind of service. And it's just a oil change. And so like, oh, sweet, you know, I'm going to get that car. That's pretty awesome, because he's a young man. He's excited to, you know, be able to see this young woman a little bit more. Who knows? But anyhow, the service desk, they drive in, hit the car. He does the service on it. He thinks, you know, I think it'd be a good idea to leave a note for her that says, hey, you know, I saw you come in, thought you were cute, would love to grab dinner with you sometime. And he leaves his number on their passenger seat. The service manager comes out, pulls the car out, gives her the key. She's ready to drive away. She looks down like, what's this? Another bill, invoice? Reads the note, gets back out of her car, goes to the service manager, explains what has just happened. The service manager calls the young man over, says, did you write this? He's like, yeah, you know, he's embarrassed. Like, what a foolish thing to do. He's like, you're fired, out, you're done. Get your tools and get out. There wasn't a conversation, wasn't like a warning, you're not getting written up. He was fired. His dream job, right? Spent 2 years here at the tech center doing everything he needed to do to get that job. It was over like that because of a simple act, right? But put yourself in her shoes, right? So she's a young person. She finds this note from this guy that she doesn't know who it is, right? But he knows what she looks like. He knows what kind of car she drives. And because he had access to her registration, she knows where she lives. He knows where she lives. So there's every reason for that to be a frightening situation, right? It's like that put her in a space where she was not comfortable. She was scared, right? The service manager recognized it immediately, and that's why he made amends. He fixed the situation. He fired the young man. That's a shame. That's a huge lost opportunity. All this kid ever wanted to do. And so with that, there's intent. He had the best of intentions, right? But then there's impact. And this impact was tragic, right? It was, you know, a behavior that, like, might not have been too bad, but she had no way of knowing that, right? She didn't know if he was a creeper or some kind of sketchy guy. Like if I say no, and then he sees me, is he gonna stalk me later on the streets? Think about what your actions are. Because even though your intents might be good, the impact might be completely opposite of what you expect, and you're gonna lose everything. I don't wanna see that happen. You've worked too hard to get where you're gonna be. Don't lose opportunities for over silly things. And so talking to a lawyer about sexual harassment, when I was kind of doing some of this work and creating some of our policies at the Tech Center, he was talking about, in the center, there's this like illegal area, like this is against the law kind of stuff. And then there's like violates company policy, right? We don't want you to do that. There's other things we could talk about in the future, but what most things happen out in the workplace, especially young people just getting out there and figuring things out, is inappropriate behaviors. And he described it as, these are the things in the realm of stupidity and ignorance, right? I'm not saying you're stupid. You might be ignorant because you just don't know. And I'm not telling you that you can't sit around the campfire with your buddies or make these comments with your friends when you're at home, but there's certain things that just aren't appropriate, and you're getting to that point in your careers, right? Because you're starting to get out there that you have to consider what you're doing and every action you take. Is it professional? Could be considered as sexual harassment? Is it something that somebody might not like? So let's try to stay out of this ignorance zone. I'm going to try to help educate you about what some of that stuff is. First thing, intent and impact. If you can wrap your head around that, that's huge. Put yourself in that other person's shoes. And so the next example I want to give you is, and it's worse, like if you screw up your own opportunities, I mean, that's just a shame, man. That's a shame. What's worse is when you screw something up for somebody else. So we had a young woman a few years ago. She took college classes while she was here. She earned all the industry recognized credentials. She was a rock star. She decided to go straight into a career path, which was awesome. She ended up with a large builder here in Vermont. Not like, it was great. She had everything lined up. Retirement, pension, insurance. She was on her way to being really successful, and she was really good. So she's on this crew, and they're building, and there's another young man, this all-male crew, which is kind of the trend in the industry. Hopefully that's going to be changing a little bit more. But her and another young man became pretty good friends, right? But just friends. But they would have lunch together and hang out and joke. Well, other people on the crew, for whatever reason, they started making comments and saying things and just being in that inappropriate zone, kind of being knuckleheads. And she was smart. She's like, hey, listen, could you stop? I just don't appreciate it. And they didn't stop. And then her friends, hey, listen, guys, at other times, you guys got to stop. She's not liking coming to work anymore. She's freaking awesome. And she's better than any of you. They didn't stop. So she went to her supervisor and said, listen, this is what's happening. This is kind of things they're saying. It's just not making me comfortable to come to work every day. And so he looked at her and said, well, I guess, is it true? And it doesn't matter if it was true or not true. Right there, that should have been a stopping point. He should have went to the crew members and said no. He shouldn't put it on her. It's not her fault or responsibility. Sexual harassment isn't funny. It's just not appropriate. Especially when you have somebody whose hopes and dreams, right, are finally achieved, and you have a bunch of knuckleheads ruining it for her. She quit, right? And she came to us. She explained to us the situation. We haven't placed anybody there since. I ran into the HR manager at a career fair a couple of years after, and he shared that, in hindsight, he wishes he could have fired everybody on that crew. And in the future, that's what will happen. And I don't want to see students ruining other students' opportunities. Not that you're going to be that person, but sometimes you might make this joke, and if they say stop, stop, right? There's certain things that friends say outside of work. But when you're out there representing yourself, don't screw up your own opportunities. Don't screw up other people's opportunities. And don't go out there and represent us as a tech center or your program instructor or your peers in a bad light. There's much more to this than just you. So I hope you kind of understand that. So that's that second piece I want to talk about. And that's hostile work environments. This young woman didn't deserve to go to work and do the thing that she always dreamed about and being basically berated every day and just made to feel bad about herself. And so we used to talk about this here at the Tech Center quite a bit, and I think some of the best ways to do this kind of show you what that might look like And so we had some students create videos, and they're awesome. They're based on real stories. So the students sat down, they thought about things that they've seen in their own lives, here at the tech center, out in the world, and they wrote these scripts and filmed them. So we're going to show those to you now. And this first one is what might happen anywhere, right? This shows a couple auto students working together, but it doesn't necessarily have to be auto students. It can be any industry.
Hey, your hand there?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Sure, it can be kind of hard when you're not used to this type of work.
I said I'm good, thank you.
All right, stop being such a butch.
So in this, you'll see what happened was this young man, he offered to help. Again, might his intent been good? Yeah, it could have been good, but then he took it someplace it didn't need to go, right? And she asked nice, like, no, I'm good, thanks, right? She said, listen, I don't need your help. He kept going on, right? Like, listen, I can help you with this. Like, no, please stop. Like, if someone tells you, please stop, just please stop. You know, and if you're not comfortable in that moment about saying it, like, maybe you step back and say, go ahead and do it, and you walk away, and you approach that person later. Like, whatever your comfort level is. But I think when you're there in the moment, if you can't address a person, which hopefully you can talk to them and say, listen, I feel like this is something you just need to let me do. You need to stop saying these things. Whatever you need to do, talk to them if you're comfortable. If not then, maybe later, you know, kind of approach it. And if you're not comfortable doing that, talk to your supervisor. But what you need to do is you need to address it. Don't let this go on and on and on until it gets you to the point where you don't want to work there anymore. And also, if you're on the other end and you just think you're making a joke or trying to help, don't take it somewhere it doesn't need to go.
Hey, can I put this down here? This is pretty heavy.
Quit being a Sally.
You're pretty good at that, you know. Maybe you should take up a more womanly profession.
Yeah, maybe.
Listen, kid, I'm just trying to toughen you up. It takes a man to do a man's job.
This next one, again, this is intent and impact. You see, you have the older gentleman kind of trying to help this other young man get through this rite of passage, right? And sometimes like, oh, this is initiation period, a breaking in period, kind of seeing what you got, trying to make you a man. Sexual harassment isn't always male on female, right? Sometimes it's female on female, sometimes it's male on male. And it doesn't necessarily have to be of a sexual nature in that like touchy-feely, grabby kind of stuff. It could be any kind of thing that puts someone else in a position based on sex or gender that doesn't feel right, right? So if you're calling someone a girl, a Nancy, right? Like you're using sexually charged language to make someone else feel bad. And then think about like if you're somebody else in that room who's a female, you're not only impacting the person you're talking about, the male you're talking about, but the female's like, well, what's wrong with being a girl and doing this job? So think about what your intent and impact is again. And even though like you think you might be helping somebody out or you think you might just be joking, stop. So in this video too, like this young man will probably quit. That I would think would be the likely outcome. Don't let that happen. If you love something, stop it. Say, listen, I worked too hard for this, for you to come in and say these things to me. It doesn't have to be rude. You know, just change the subject. Make light of it. Like we could talk about different ways you can do that. There's a whole method of going through this, and that's something we could talk about in the future. But right now, let's look at this. Let's look at this next video.
Hi, how was everything? What can I get you?
Some company would be nice. Want to join me?
I've got a lot of other tables to run. I don't think they'd appreciate me sitting down.
Maybe later then.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Hey, I'm not really comfortable going back out there.
Why? Because of him?
Yeah.
It's harmless. Play along. You might get a better tip.
So this is the last thing around sexual harassment that I want to talk about. This is quid pro quo. This is like a little bit of this for a little bit of that. And so in this video, generally quid pro quo is all about as a supervisor who has some kind of power control over you and asks you to do things that might be of a sexual nature, make comments, and like you're kind of like, well, I need this job, I need this money, I need this paycheck. I can't really say anything because they have this power over me. So that's quid pro quo, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I get to do whatever I want because you get a paycheck based on whether I let you stay here working or not. In this case, it's the customer saying like, your tip kind of depends on whether or not you flirt back with me, right? And that's quid pro quo. You get paid because you let me do what I want to do. The young woman does the right thing, goes to her supervisor, but sometimes some of these things might be so historically ingrained and some people might have gotten so used to it that they themselves don't realize that this isn't how things have to be, that this isn't appropriate, and sexual harassment just isn't something that should be tolerated. And so in this case, if you were ever, and it doesn't have to be in the service industry, any kind of industry, if you have approached your supervisor about a situation and it doesn't resolve the way you think it should resolve, come to us, right? We're here to help you. There's no reason, again, for sexual harassment to happen, whether in school, on a co-op, in an internship, at your job site. This is something that, like I said, it's rampant. It's everywhere. Half of young women, 1 in 6 of young men, every industry. And if you feel like you're being sexually harassed for any reason whatsoever, just say stop, right? Whatever form that might be. Like I said, we could talk about different ways to do that. And if you're observing it, step in. Just don't be afraid to say, hey, dude, come on, it's not funny. Or listen, like, really? Like, why would you say that? Put them on the spot. Put that person saying those things on the spot or doing those things on the spot. You're going to be seen as the bigger person. And if none of that works, again, push your supervisor. But then there's everybody here in the building, right? Your program instructor. There's me, there's Miss Joels, Colin, Miss Allard, whoever you are comfortable with. Literally, anybody here at RTCC cares about you going out, being the most successful that could be. So don't lose opportunities because you're out in this stupid zone, right? This inexperienced zone. Think about what your consequences might be to your own career, and don't ruin other people's opportunities and things that they've worked for just because you think it's funny, because sexual harassment is just not funny. So that's what I got is please make sure you think about these things. Let's talk about them more if you have more questions, and if you're not comfortable talking to me, again, Ms. Joels is a great resource, Colin's a great resource. We would love to make sure that all your time, effort, energy that you put into here isn't blown up by some silly, stupid, in-the-moment action. All right, have a great weekend. Super excited to wrap up week 2 and see you again next Friday.